This is the Milky Way quilt tutorial, and in the description below this video there's a link to my blog and you can download your free instructions. It's 5 pages and 2 pages of paper piecing. And in this video I'm going to show you how to use the paper piecing method. We're not going to do any paper piecing, but I'm going to show you how you can paper piece these. And the other method is to use a new block on board by AccuQuilt called Star of the East. I call this quilt Milky Way because it's a cluster of stars, so it reminded me of the Milky Way. I got the idea for this quilt from a class I took from Winnie Fleming. It was called 22 Stars. And the setting, she had a picture of one of her former students, or previous student, who put the setting this way. So it's a little bit different than what the setting was for the class. And I like this setting, so I used it. I just like how the stars look like they're sitting on top of the quilt. And this quilt finishes at 51 inches by 64 inches. The blocks, it's called Star of the East, and they can be paper pieced or cut with the AccuQuilt, and I'm going to give you instructions for both. The block is 9-inch finished, and there are 24 star blocks, and it has a diagonal setting in it. So there are 24 star blocks, then there are some setting triangles to finish the quilt, and then a square in the center. So there are paper foundations at the end of the instructions, and we'll go over those in just a minute. So the first, on page 2, we start with the paper piecing, and I show you how to use fat quarters for the light and dark star points. So let me show you the papers first. There are 2 pages of papers, and this is the dark background and this is the light background. And I also noted the dark fabrics for the background with these squares here so you can tell them apart. And one thing I want to tell you about this is I have a graphic design program, but I'm not very proficient in it. I know enough just to get by. So these lines here on the outside, the dashed lines, are supposed to be the cutting line, but it is not 1/4 of an inch away from the sewing line. So what you're going to do is place your 1/4 inch mark of your ruler. When you're ready to trim it off, place the 1/4 inch line of your ruler onto this sewing line here. And then once you place the 1/4 inch line on there, then trim on the edge of the ruler. Don't trim on this dotted line. And there's a big caution here that tells you what to do, not to cut on this dotted line. So these 2 pages, you'll need 24 copies of these pages, 1 for each star block. This is the light side, and there are 4 pieces. This is the dark side, and there are 4 pieces. The way they are arranged on these papers is not the way they are pieced together, the 4 pieces. And you'll see that later on. So we have to set it a different way because the block has 2 colors. It's got a light and a dark side, and you'll see that later too. So for the paper piecing, you can use 8 dark and 8 light fat quarters, and from each set of fat quarters you can get 3 blocks. And this tells you how to cut the fat quarters first into 6-inch by 21-inch pieces. Then you're going to subcut those into 2.5 inches by 6-inch pieces. And those are pieces like this. So this is a light and a dark for one of the paper piecing. And then it also gives you instructions for the light background and the dark background, how to cut those pieces for paper piecing. And what all of them are, you cut a square. There are 2 different size squares, and you cut the square in half on the diagonal. And those are used for these triangle sections, sections 1 and 4. in section 2 and 3, you use these little bars you cut out for those. And then you just do all your paper piecing. For the AccuQuilt, I used the brand new die they've just released called Star of the East, and it is die number 55587, and it makes a 9-inch finished block. I did most of the blocks in this sample quilt with paper piecing method because I didn't have this die yet. But as soon as I got it, I realized I really do like the way it pieces and cuts extremely fast. So, and I think I had a better block than the paper pieced version. So if you're into AccuQuilt, this is a really good die, and I think they have them on special right now if you're seeing this in September of 2022. It has really good instructions on the back, and you can follow those, but I've given you some instructions we're going to go over here. So I've learned to keep these instructions because a lot of times you can't find these instructions on the website. So here is what the die looks like, and this is the star points here, shape C. And if you put one piece of fabric, or if you put 2 layers of fabric on here, you'll cut 8 of these, so that's enough for one block. And then here are the 2 triangles, just like the paper pieced version, the 2 sizes of different triangles. You can use 6 dark fat quarters and 6 light fat quarters and pair them together, and you will get enough for 4 blocks from one set of fat quarters. And this tells you how to cut them 4 inches by 21 inches. And you're going to cut those in half to make 2 of them at 4 by 10. So these, the 4 by 10 inches, you put them face up to both of the fabrics together, and you'll cut enough for 1 block. And then it also tells you how to cut for the 2 sets of triangles, or you're going to cut long pieces and cut both sets of triangles at the same time. Once you cut all your fabrics, you can begin piecing your units. And the goal here is to make this unit here, which is going to be the same as our units for paper piecing. So our goal is to get to the same place in the paper piecing as we are with the AccuQuilt, because then everything goes together the same way. So you need to pay attention to your dark and light little triangles, the little triangles and the big triangles. And so this tells you exactly how to do it and how many to make. And so here is your dark units, and you'll have 4 of these when you're finished. You're going to have 2 of each. And then on this next page, these are your light units. They're pieced the same way, and you'll end up with 4 of those as well. So these 4, and the light 4 and the dark 4 will make 1 block. So once we get to this step 5 on page 4, after we've done that, then we're caught up with where people are if they have paper pieced and trimmed their papers and removed the papers. Then next we're going to assemble the block. At this point, all the paper piecing has been done and the papers removed, and all of your piecing has been done if you use the AccuQuilt block on board. We're on page 4 now under Assemble the Block, and from this point on, the assembly of the block and the quilt will be exactly the same no matter which method you choose to sew. I'm going to use, I've used the block on board, the AccuQuilt, to sew these. Now the paper pieced version, the pressing will be all out in the direction of however you pieced it. So, and there's kind of no control over the pressing when you're paper piecing. But on the AccuQuilt, to this point, we have ironed our seams open. So all of the seams have been pressed open. And what we're going to do first, step number 1 under Assemble the Block, we're going to sew 2 dark units together and then the 2 light units together. And that's this. So we're going to take these 2, sew them together like that, and these 2 like that, and these two. So we're going to go from 8 pieces per block to 4 pieces per block. Now here are the 4 pieces we have, and instead of pressing the seams open, I'm going to press toward the light fabric. So this yellow here is the light fabric. So all of these are pressed in this direction. And why we do that is when we put these together in the block, the seams will be rotating around the block. So they're all going in the same direction now. And next we're going to piece these two together like this, and the other two will be pieced like this. So now we'll turn 4 pieces into 2 pieces. Now I've sewn these two. Before we press this, I want to show you a little trick to help reduce some of the bulk right around the center. Because remember, we have 16 pieces of fabric meeting here. This is the seam I just sewed, and I sewed it in red thread so you can see what's going on. So here's the seam we just sewed, and you look here at the end of the seam, and there are a few stitches right here. We're going to take those stitches out. So what I did was I cut the threads right here, and then I took all the stitches up here out. So if we flip it over, we're going to do the same thing on this side. Here's the seam I just stitched, and these threads up here I'm going to take out. So there you have those stitches right there are out. Let's cut this. And do that on the other one too. Here's the seam I just sewed, and these stitches will come out. You flip it over, here's the seam we just sewed, and these stitches right here will come out. And I'll show you later why that works. After the stitches have been removed, you're going to press again toward the light color fabric on both of these. So both will be pressed in this direction. Now we're going to put these together and sew these two together. Now the 2 halves have been stitched together, but before we do our final pressing on this one, we're going to take some more stitches out. Now these stitches like to hide in this little crease right here, right in there. Here's the stitch we just made all the way across, and the stitches are right in there. There's probably 3 or 4 of them, the same amount you had before. So take those stitches out on this side, flip it over, and then here again they're hidden right inside this little crease here. Take those stitches out as well. So I have removed the stitches here, and sometimes it helps here if you start at the top. The stitches right here at the very top are usually easier to get. And what you want to do is open this up, and this side will be pressed up. So I just finger press it and then flip it around, or this side will be pressed down. Or you can just flip it and press it up. So again, you want to press toward the light color on the star point. Now see, there's a lump there, and it's not too terribly bad. So we're going to flip it over. You see this seam is pressed this way, this one this way, and you see all the seams go around, except for these 2 seams that we haven't pressed yet. And so by removing those stitches right here, and this seam is up and this seam is down, it opens up this little area right in here. And if these tips are cut off because I use the AccuQuilt, so it doesn't have the points. But if you had points on there, it would make a little 8-point star in there. So you can see how it's laid down nicely here and here. So when you go to press it, press from over here first, and press your seams this way, and then up this way, or down this way, and then go and make sure you have your little circle here going in a circle, and hit that with the iron really good, and press down with the iron and really hold it there, and then press it from the front. And if you do that, you'll see the bulk has been reduced and it lays pretty flat. Also, another point I found that a lot of times I had a really, like a little volcano here, and I was trying to figure out what was wrong. And it dawned on me that when I was stitching, my seam allowance would get smaller as I went to the center. And that's the worst thing you can do, because so if you have a scant seam allowance times 8 or 16, it's going to make a big difference. So I made sure I had a really good, accurate 1/4 of an inch. No scant here, 1/4 of an inch. Now, at this point, we should have all 24 of our blocks made. And in the cutting instructions for the light and dark backgrounds, I showed you how we cut these setting triangles, or these side triangles. And so you're going to sew 6 blocks that are half dark and half light. And then there's 1 white square for the center. So on page 5, here's the quilt layout. Now, just one thing you might note, that normally when you put blocks on point, you have side setting triangles, and then you have smaller corner triangles. But this layout, because of the design I wanted, all of the triangles, even those in the corner, are the side setting triangles. So they're all cut the same size. Just a note, if you're trying to enlarge the quilt or make it smaller, you do not cut corner triangles. You use 2 of the side triangles in each of the corners. So there are 9 rows, and I always start at the upper left, and this tells you, this shows you each row, and these words here, left and right, this is the pressing direction. So when I piece these 2 together, then I'll press those to the left. And then when I piece these together, I piece those to the right. And what that does is it allows me to nest these seams when I sew the rows together. So lay your quilt out and lay out just and follow this diagram, and then start piecing your quilt together. I usually do a couple of rows, then I sew the rows together, then do a few more rows and sew those together. It really goes together nicely. So thank you for watching, and I hope you make one of these for yourself.